Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne and with my guest, Leslie Fuller. Leslie's career has been centered around senior adults for a long time. She earned a master's of social work with a focus on gerontology and moved right into working as a director of resident services for a senior living apartment complex. After 6 years, she transitioned to an executive director position of an Alzheimer's and dementia care community, and then on to the role of a Divisional Dementia Care Manager supporting communities in 13 different states. So dealing with the senior population and the related challenges is certainly something she has knowledge on, and today she uses that knowledge and experience to provide training, tools, and coaching to communities of all sizes, with a goal of helping them learn to create a community culture that supports optimal quality of life for the residents, the staff, and the families alike. Leslie, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. I'm really looking forward to picking your brain.
I appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here coming to you from my closet.
So, inside joke, guys, a lot of us that do some podcasting, a closet is a really great place to record because the acoustics in there are fantastic. So, it's a little unknown secret. So, I want to jump right into the discussion and start off about dementia as a whole, because I think it's something that so many of us in this demographic either are dealing with a parent that's sort of in that umbrella diagnosis or knows a friend or family that's dealing with something in that space. And so I just was hoping that maybe you could shed some light on sort of what that looks like in the brain, how that sort of progresses, any knowledge there that you can share with us to kind of just set the stage.
Yeah, so a lot of people think that their concept of dementia is just memory loss. And memory loss is a part of dementia, obviously, but there are more changes that go on in the brain that really affect the overall cognitive processing. So decision-making, empathy, tracking, sequencing. The brain does all of those wonderful practices for us in different parts of the brain. And so depending on where the dementia is starting to have that effect on the brain, you're going to see different symptoms. So, for example, the classic losing something. You and I might come out of the room and go, shoot, where did I put such and such? I know I had it. And we can backtrack and we can go into the other room and we can think through, okay, what was I doing? I use cues of visual things around me to say, oh, that's right. I was looking at this cup when I went to set that down. And we can logic our way through that. And as we age, that slows a little bit, and that's normal aging. But what isn't normal aging, and when we start to say, hey, we need to maybe look into this more. And it doesn't mean it's dementia. There are lots of different things that can cause some of that confusion or processing challenges that we need to check with our doctors about that may not be dementia that we can get taken care of. So vitamin deficiencies, thyroid issues. There are lots of different things that we need to look at. But for someone who's truly experiencing dementia, they may walk in, say, hey, where did I put that? And then they leave to go look for it and say, well, I must need more toilet paper. They go to the store, they come back, and they go to put that toilet paper up and they have 15 other packages of it. They don't have that processing and that logic to problem solve through that, to see it. It's really changes in the brain and our thinking that disrupt our daily routine. So that's why it's so important to get early medical attention to this, to really look at those symptoms, to find out what it is. It may end up, you hopefully you'll see a neurologist. Neurologists really can decipher what those causes are if they're not just a medical cause. Not sure where else you wanted me to go with that. I could teach a whole hour class on that.
I think that was packed in itself because I actually learned a few things there because I've been talking to a few people as I build this series, and one of the things that everybody touches on, and of course we think of ourselves, is that we do, as we age, middle age, whatever, we're always forgetting our glasses or our keys or whatever, right? Anyone you talk to in this age demographic will tell you they experience that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to me to try to figure out how you draw the line when you're dealing with somebody that you might be kind of suspecting, how to draw the line. And what I took out of what you said was, a lot of times it's the being able to problem solve or track back through the logic, like, oh, yeah, I was in the laundry room and I was reading the label on the bottle, so I put my glasses in there and that's probably where they were. Whereas somebody that's starting this path of dementia maybe can't think backwards. And I had not heard that before. Did I get that right?
You did. You did. And I may be going down a different path that you're going to bring up, but I get asked a lot, how do I talk to my mom about it? I'm worried about she's exhibiting these changes and I don't know how to bring up the conversation with her. And I would challenge anybody that's listening to this call today, whether you're concerned about somebody or not, start talking about it now. I've had that. My mother is almost 89. She's not experiencing any dementia, but I've had the talk with her. I say, hey, if I start noticing things that I'm concerned about, how are we going to talk about this? What do you want me to do? And, the first time you have that conversation, it may be I'm not going to say the horrible things that a lot of people have this horrible concept of that life is over after dementia, which it's not. But if you have a couple of those conversations, you can say, hey, all right, Sister Kim and I'll get together with you. And we'll just say, hey, these are the things we're noticing that are slightly different with you, that you haven't done this before, and grow that conversation. So being able to recognize that we're not saying you have dementia, we're saying something's different. And let's talk up front now. What do you want us to do about that? And it takes away one of the biggest fears, I think, for people about the thought of having dementia is I'm going to lose everything. Not only am I going to lose my ability to have memories or make decisions, but everybody's going to take that away. I'm going to lose my independence.
I agree. So there's two things that I want to tag on to that because I think your advice is phenomenal there. And I don't think most people do it, but everybody's different. So let's just say you have a parent or loved one who strongly resists the conversation, and still you get to the point where you're seeing signs be exhibited and they are just absolutely adamant that we're crazy, the kids are crazy, or the loved ones are crazy. What do you suggest in that scenario?
Oh, every situation's different, and they're so complex because the family dynamics that have gone on for the previous 50 years play into this.
Yeah.
It depends on what the relationship is. If you have the patriarch that has always been the decision maker for the family and nobody ever bucked dad, and now dad is having, I had a military general one time, and that was tough because the family had always been yes, sir, no, sir mentality with dad. And now they're having to make those decisions.
Yeah.
I wish I had one right answer to say for that, and there isn't. But one of the greatest things you can do is realize that you're a team on this, and teams function together. Think of a well-run team. There are poorly run teams, but you have to come together and identify what is the core goal of how we want to help dad or help mom, in a situation like that where dad's denying and the symptoms are progressing and poor mom's getting worn out because she's living there with him. And we have to recognize that there are multiple tasks here, right? There's the task of supporting mom and helping her through this. And how do we give her some respite? And how do we support there? And also, how do we support dad? It's interesting. And I think it's like with any of us, with anything in life, there are some people that can accept it. I have a friend whose father, before he passed recently, understood he had dementia. And he would tell people, yeah, I don't remember things. I mean, he was very cognizant of it. And then there are others that have no concept I wish I could remember, there's actually a term, a medical term for a person who cannot recognize their own condition. And that exists out there too. And so if you can't get them, then you have to figure out ways to just support them in their life, in this new life that they're living. And how can we make it as positive as we can for them and for those around them, and get good medical care?
I love what you said about the team. And one of my questions, actually, somebody in my group asked me to ask you this, was around dealing with it when you have two parents and one is healthy and the other one starts to progress through, this disease, and what that looks like and how you support them both. Because who knows, that person that's, I'll say, healthy, they may or may not even want to acknowledge it as well. I imagine there's both scenarios where they get it, they're worn down, they're struggling with helping support the the spouse, and then on the other side, there's probably situations where that healthy spouse doesn't want to acknowledge it. They want to sort of ignore it too. So I'm sure that both of those scenarios exist. Any advice on either scenario, or is it just the same? It's coming together as a team, figuring out how you can support them both in the best way and get the right medical help. Is that kind of the generic umbrella there?
Yeah, it is. And I think that, so let's pose a scenario here of dad has, his dementia is progressing. Mom wants to be that, I've always been there for him. I've always taken care of him. That's not going to change now. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I think if we recognize that, it's going to be most important for her not to try to take over. That's just going to upset her most. But being able to say, okay, Mom, we understand how strong you are. And if you want to continue being strong for Dad, you have to take care of yourself. So Mom, what would happen? What do you want us to do? Let's say you had a fall and ended up in the hospital. Can we maybe talk through what that plan would look like? And getting her to recognize that does one of two things. It gets her to recognize that, holy cow, that would be a problem. And we want to do what you want, Mom. So it gives her independence again, but it opens up that window for her to acknowledge that you are willing to be there and that we do need to kind of make plans. I like to use the analogy of, if you are a big apartment complex or a big office building business, you don't create a fire plan, an exit plan when the fire's going on. You plan ahead, you have it. It's like insurance. Mom, look at us as your insurance plan, but we have to know what that insurance plan looks like. And I think by doing that, you're just opening up that door, which lends to more discussions of, hey, Mom, I would love on Saturdays I would love to bring over lunch for Dad. And I'd like you to go out and visit Aunt Mary, because I'd love that for both of you.
Yeah.
So it's the trying to take over people's lives that really puts up that brick wall. And if you can offer gifts like that, it'll start helping them realize.
I think that's fantastic advice. And the common theme there is to have the conversations and be very open about all of this and be able to work through it.
Yeah.
So I didn't plan on asking you this, but I did a different interview yesterday, and I'm just thinking back about her experience. And I think it's a common experience with when you get into the position where the dementia has progressed and you're the sole provider or caretaker, I guess is the right word. This is before putting somebody in a facility, and you are sort of having to take away their independence, and you're also having to deal with some of their, outlashes, or sometimes the behavior can be difficult, right? Things can be really sort of unbelievable from some of the stories that you hear, and we'll touch on some positive ones too. But I guess my question is, do you have any advice for somebody who's sort of the brunt of that situation, and that it's not their fault, they don't really mean it, but as a person with a heart and feelings and, how do you not take it personally, I guess is my question.
That's a great question.
With no specific answer, I know,
yeah.
But
and my mother supported her father with dementia, but at the time, this was back in the 70s, and we didn't know it was dementia. And we since have learned all about that. And she looks back and, she's 89 and she still has hurt in her heart for the kinds of things that went on.
Yes.
And it's good for her to talk about it now. I think getting yourself your own counselor and helping process through some of those thoughts, because like you said, we are human. And as much as we can recognize and say the dementia is causing such harm to my loved one and I want to be there for them, but you're also having to make some decisions that are difficult decisions. I think helping them also to acknowledge that let's set dementia aside for a second. If I came into your office right now and I took that computer away from you behind you and I took that microphone away from you and then I put something in there that I thought was going to work for you. Let's just put a game in here for you, Marianne, because you'll have fun playing that. But you're not able to do any of things, but just enjoy life. It's okay, honey. The terminology and the demeaning attitude that some people can give, we cause some of their angst. And we need to recognize that they're still an adult. They're still a person with thoughts and dreams and hopes, just like we are. And we have a lot more impact on their environment, on the words that they hear, on the emotions that they receive from us. We do have control over all of that. So if you're hurting inside over how they're responding, let's look at what their world is and how can we make it more appropriate for them with things that are meaningful to them still, and give them ways to be successful as a person.
So that's a great segue. I know something that you talk about is strengths-based perspective over dementia. I hope I got that right.
You did.
Can you explain that to us? Because I think, I sort of know a parallel in leadership and coaching and building teams, and I think it's very similar, but I'd like to hear how it applies to someone with dementia.
Sure. A strengths-based approach in a nutshell is look at what people can do, not what they can't do. So in a medical setting or in true kind of the old school facilities, old school institutional settings, the kind of places our parents always said, never put me there, right? All they did was this person has a diagnosis of dementia. It's going to get worse and we must manage them. That's old school. In a strengths-based perspective, okay, the dementia diagnosis is there, but let's not focus on that. Let's focus on Marianne and the fact that Marianne still loves being with people, okay? Marianne is a great conversationalist. Her dementia has caused maybe some of her words to not, to us, make sense, but she still loves being with people. She still loves talking with people. So how can we support Marianne in doing that? How can we set up a lifestyle for her that really feeds that, because that makes her feel good? Mm-hmm. Or maybe Marianne always loved gardening and she had this immaculate, huge garden in her yard. She doesn't have the physical abilities now to have the same kind of garden she did, but gardening is very meaningful to her. So let's make sure that she has opportunities to have a flower bed, that if she wants to go in, and we had one resident in a community one time who they would go out and plant flowers. It was spring, they'd plant the new marigolds, the petunias, and when she would go out and dig them all up. And so one person in the community, well, we can't let her out there. I said, oh, yes, you can. She just spent a half an hour out there meaningfully working in that garden. It wasn't what you expected her to do, but you know what? That meant a lot for her to be out there with the gloves on, with the trowel, with the dirt, and doing all that. We need to find what's meaningful for them and provide opportunity. Another concept that I really hope people can take away from this is when somebody is further along in this process, it's not just early stage where we're wondering, but maybe they've progressed some. Recognize that emotions for them are far more important than the facts of the situation. Mm. The fact that she dug up a live plant, well, to you and me, that makes no sense. Doesn't matter. Did it put her in a good place? Did she have a great time with her? If you're out there, could you maybe say, so Marianne, you think that one needs to go someplace else? It doesn't really look good there, does it? What do you think, Marianne? Where should we put this instead? You focus on the moment, you focus on the emotion of the moment, and that is where we can be that positive 50%. Dementia affects the person I look at, 50% of it affects their world, the other 50% is us. If I say, Marianne, no, honey, don't dig that up. No, that belongs there. I'm trying to make you attend to the world you're in rather than the reverse of that. So that's a concept to take, is really finding a way to find what's real for you, what's meaningful for you, and where you have emotional strengths or tangible strengths. Cooking is an example. People say, well, mom can't cook meals anymore. Well, she may not be able to make the whole meal, but why don't you sit down and have her peel the potatoes with you and talk with her about that and have her tell you about the meals that she made or her favorite recipes, that kind of thing. You're focusing on her strengths of where her heart is and where those familiar, comfortable moments are for her. Another thing is even house cleaning. We can all sit here and say we don't like to house clean, but guess what? Sometimes isn't it great to just put on some earpods and meaninglessly clean the house, right? Why not? Especially I work with senior living communities a lot. I said, if you have a resident that wants to do the vacuum, encourage that. Stay away from the term, well, we allow them to do that. You don't allow an 85-year-old to do anything. They're their own person. We're not giving them permission. You're encouraging that because guess what? Thanks so much. I really appreciate you doing that for us, Marianne. Maybe Marianne vacuums the same 2 square feet for 5 minutes. Great. You did a darn good job of vacuuming that 2 square feet, right?
I absolutely love that advice and your perspective. And I can just imagine the places that you run and how awesome they are. So it leads me to wonder, for people that do have to make the decision, I'm sure the most difficult decision of putting somebody into a home or facility, I don't have all the right words, but somewhere that they can be taken care of. What's some advice around looking for a place that embraces that kind of mentality versus just putting them in a corner? And I know there's so much with, insurance and where you can go and all, but put that aside for a minute. Like, what do you look for that would tell us that they're going to be somewhere that sort of embraces that kind of attitude?
Well, it's funny you ask. I'm in the midst of trying now. My sister doesn't have dementia per se. She's had some changes, some cognitive changes, but I'm in the middle of finding an assisted living for my sister-in-law right now. And all of a sudden, as a professional, I'm like, oh, wow, I have to use all my tools.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest things that I recommend, if talking with your directors, to listen to their conversation. How do they describe what they do and where they work? I have a whole scenario class that I teach on language, and the words that we use really matter. So if somebody is walking through and talking about, you bring your mom in for a tour and she's, hi, honey. Oh, she's so cute, isn't she? Okay, check the not so good list. Do they treat them as an adult? Do they treat the residents that you're seeing them interacting with in a respectful way, in an encouraging way, in a way that invites them in? When you walk into the environment, what does it feel like? What is literally the sense that you get when you walk in the door? I visited 2 recently, and one was just, you saw people, but you could hear a pin drop. There was no music. There was no laughter. There was no life to it. And then the other place that I walked into, I was meeting with the director, and one of the residents walked in, and she just had the biggest smile on her face, and she was holding a doll. And actually, no, it was a stuffed animatronic dog, which there's some that are really quality out there. And she was telling us about it. And we said, well, what's his name? And she was just happy as could be. And the director was interacting with her in not a childish way. Those therapeutic dogs, some people look at, oh my gosh, they look at that as childish, that we give that. But those therapeutic dogs and cats can really help. If you have someone who always had dogs and cats, that sense of being able to have to pet, to just have that
Comfort.
companion with them can be very meaningful. So just that edge of her comfortableness and coming in, the director didn't ask her to leave. So there's some of that. I think looking at how do they train their staff. I am huge on, just like we have to help families learn on how to interact better, which is, again, what I teach. I'm also a volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. They have some great classes to just open up your mind to thinking about dementia differently and seeing how we can be supportive. So find out, how do they train their staff? Do they have ongoing training? Interview some of the staff members that are there and ask them to tell you about some of the things that are, and listening for what their approach is, because how they're going to talk to you right then and there is how they're going to talk to the residents too.
And I think those were some good tips. It's being very observant, right? Being very observant. And I think the tip on, watching how they interact, I wouldn't have thought of do they treat them like a child? I think that's a really good one that most of us probably wouldn't think of. I actually wouldn't have made that a check in the no box, but now that you explain it and talk about it, it does make me think of it differently. So I think that in itself is a good one.
Sure. Going back to, terminology, we do need to make sure that our residents are safe. That's part of what we have to do. But the old terminology of, a locked unit, we're a locked unit. Well, do you know what? Where else do people live in locked units? It's prison, right? I mean, think about it. Where else in life are people kept behind a locked door where they're not allowed to go out? That's a prison.
Yeah.
But most of the communities have to have those locked doors from a safety standpoint. So there's just such a difference between when your staff looks at that door as, we're a locked unit, they can't go out, versus the staff that says, we want to make sure that the residents are safe and that we're a secure community, that if they want to go out, we make sure that they have somebody that goes out, just to make sure they have a safe experience. Just the way you look at that locked door changes how you're going to look at the entire program and the entire, because it is a community. It truly is a community.
Thanks for that, because it's just a nuance, but that nuance, as you just explained it two different ways, it is really big. It really is big. And I'm not sure I would pick up on that, but now I would be thinking about it that way. So thanks for sharing that. I want to also ask based on your experience, is there any advice you can give around connecting with a loved one that, has really progressed in the disease? I'm sure there's a stage where you can't really get them to recognize you, but you probably can still connect with them. So talk to me about anything you've seen there, or any advice you can give to somebody who's sort of grappling with that.
For a person who has reached past where words aren't the form of communication, we really need to turn and look at our senses. Because again, remember, in the brain, your temporal lobes are going to be what controls words, our understanding of words, our processing of words, and our ability to produce words. Well, if that part of the brain isn't working so well anymore and can't do that, we can't just give up, because guess what? There's so much more of the brain still working. Again, going back to that strengths-based approach, right? Okay, so that part isn't working. Let's look at the part that is. And that is where our senses are. So taste still goes on. You and I both, I'm sure, when we go out with our friends, one of the things we do, we say, hey, why don't we go down to the bakery and get one of those great croissants? Or let's go get a cup of coffee together, or let's go to lunch together. Taste and food is such a bonding experience with people. So look at taste, find out, try to figure out what their favorite things are, and maybe bring one of those in, share something together. You don't have to talk. So I like to tell people, imagine you're with somebody close, but they speak German and you speak American, right? Well, you can't connect with words. How else would you connect? Look at just enjoying the outdoors together, being able to go outside and take a walk, observing nature together, because outside you're going to have things to look at. You're going to use the sense of sight to take in the world around you, and to also hear things when you're outside, listening to the birds, listening to the dogs bark, finding things that you can connect with on that. But you have to tell yourself, how would I communicate with someone if I didn't have words? Set aside that dementia is causing this. How would you talk with somebody from Germany? Or how would you communicate with somebody from Germany?
I really like the advice. And really, you're making me think in so many ways that I wouldn't have, which is obviously your purpose. But I'm thinking about them losing their words, not only their words to produce words, but to your point, to recognize and say words. So it's kind of, I guess, it probably is easy for people to kind of make the assumption they're not really, I don't even know how to say it properly, but they're not really there anymore fully. But yet, to your point, that's not really true. We have people that can't speak, can't hear, can't whatever, but they enjoy life just like we do. So I think you just have to look at it differently and really tap into the pieces and parts that do work. And I think that's a common theme here, right? But I don't know that we all think about that.
You know, when I worked in independent living, even, I would have family members come in and say, oh, you should have known my dad when he was just this amazing person. And I would say, your dad is amazing, because all I knew their dad from was right now. And we have to recognize in ourselves that we're the ones causing this perception of we're looking at what's missing, not what's there.
Yeah.
So we have to reflect on ourselves. How can I set aside that you still want to remember that wonderful, the relationships you had and how that was different. And then we need to say, okay, that was awesome. It was great. I have it in my memory vaults of dad. Now, what is great? What is going to be great going forward today? And stop beating ourselves up and constantly looking backwards and comparing, because it doesn't do them any good and it doesn't do us any good as that family member.
Yeah, I mean, it ties into a general lesson that some of us were just working on in a book, and it's about the gap between expectations and reality. And we often get hung up there, and you can't really be present if you're so focused on the expectations of what should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to put that down just in general, and it applies here based on what you're saying. Just in general, you have to really let go of the expectations and just be accepting of whatever comes your way, and just know you'll deal with it, and just forget about trying to compare to what you thought it would be or what it should be or what it used to be, and just accept what it is, and then figure out how to make the best of it within that situation. So I think that's really great advice. So one of the things I wanted to get you to do, just because I've seen some of the write-ups that you've done on your blog around this, and I thought it was really fascinating and highlighted sort of how you can look at things in a different perspective, is share a few stories that you've seen along the way with some of your, not sure if we call them clients or residents or either probably, but I know you've had some fantastic experiences where maybe the average person in your position or someone working in one of those facilities might not look at it the same way. And in your blog, you're bringing forward that there is a different perspective on some of this stuff and a different way to handle it, and you get a different result. Could you share a few of your favorites with us?
I will. And I think you had commented the other day, and I think it was on this story, a resident who really taught me. I learned so much as we supported him. We got a call that they had an individual, a man, a younger man. He was in his 60s, and he had been, quote unquote, kicked out of 3 different places. And they wanted us to come assess him and determine whether we could provide a good home for him. And my nurse went. I was new in my position. So I'd worked in independent living for 6 years, had my degree, thought I knew all this. And then I started in a memory care and went, wow, there's a lot I don't know. So, but she came back after the assessment and said, Leslie, I really think we can help him and we can be a good place for him. But based on the reasons he was, quote unquote, kicked out of the other places, I was anxious, but I said, you know what? If you believe we can do this, I trust you. Let's do what we can. So John came, and he had been a very successful man, and he had done a lot of volunteer work for Habitat for Humanity over the years. He was very much a hands-on, carpentry kind of guy, construction. And he was very physically fit. He was strong, kind of a bigger guy, and he would roam all through the community. He would constantly be like running his hands down the door frames, turning doorknobs, just very much that tangible, that carpenter part of him that was using that sense of touch to take in his environment and to do things. And we had a larger community, so he had so much space that he could roam in, which was great for him. That was part of, I think, the problem. They had him in very small communities before. But one of the things John would do was when he was content, he would lie down on the floor with his hands behind his head, kind of like he was lying on a beach, right? Soaking in the sun. But it might be right in the middle of the living room during an activity. It might be in front of the front door. And I know in these other communities, that was something, oh, he can't do that. That's a safety hazard. Somebody's going to trip on him. We have to get him up. And I said, let's think about this, guys. We promote us as being home, right? I'm very big on not calling places where people live facilities. I don't want to live in a facility. To me, the word facility conjures up a manufacturing plant or a prison or a storage warehouse, right? We are not storing people. We're providing life for them and a home. So I said, this is John's home. At your house, do I get to tell you where you're going to lie down and take a nap and relax? No. So we need to respect John for this being his home. And so we started doing that and recognizing, and we got very comfortable even explaining to people who would visit. At first it's like, well, he can't be on the floor while you're giving a tour. I said, why not? Because I wanted to share with these families that this is what's meaningful for John. And we're just going to walk around, and that everyone here has unique ways that they like to live their life. And if your mom moves in with us, we're going to figure out what that is for her, and we're going to respect that for her. So John got very comfortable there. We did have one situation one time that became of a concern because he started wanting to hold the hands of these, remember, he's a bigger guy, and these little frail 90-pound dripping wet women, and he would want to hold their hands and have them walk with him. So they couldn't keep up with him, and he was holding on very tightly. And we assessed and realized that John's sister used to visit every day, and they would walk around the community holding hands every day. And she'd had surgery and she hadn't been there in a while. He was missing that. He was missing that physical contact. So we as a team said, whenever you see him, ask him if he'll come with you. Ask him to hold your hand. Give him a hug. And so we just started giving him what he needed, which was that physical touch. And we were able to pull his attention away from those other residents. And so we just have to, as care partners for individuals who are experiencing dementia, we have to start thinking differently, because guess what? Their brain is making them think a little differently than it used to be. And if we're going to support them, we can't expect to just pull them back into our reality and the way things are supposed to be. You have to be willing to think differently and be very transparent with people about being open about it.
I love those stories. I could listen to your stories all day long, because I think there's listen, one of the premises of this whole show is that there are messages. I say messages in the middle, right? Because I think there's messages in books that we can read and stories that people can tell and experiences that others that have gone through that. If we share them, it's sort of like giving a cheat sheet or the cliff notes to somebody, because we don't all have to suffer over the same lessons. We can share what we've learned so to make it a little easier for somebody else. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. And I so appreciate the work you're doing. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything else? Gosh, we touched on a lot of things. I could talk to you for hours. I suspect I may want to have you back. They're going to love this information. But is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd want to leave people with?
I think because your audience is of the demographic where my guess is half the people listening have helped someone who's living with dementia, or they know someone or a neighbor. I think a piece of advice I would give is that if you do know someone in that situation, do the opposite of pulling back. Too many people say, well, I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to say, and I don't know how to help. So they almost start pulling back. Do the opposite of that. Embrace that person. Say, you know what? I don't know a lot about this, but I want to learn more with you and I want to support you and help you. People who are living with dementia, even if they're still living in their own home, living in general community, start having friends leave. People get scared because they don't know. And I truly believe that concept of nothing to fear but fear itself. You're only fearful because it's the unknown. So educate yourself. Like I said, I do volunteer education for the Alzheimer's Association. They have a series of 8 different classes that you can take to learn, to kind of take the sting away from, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. So educate yourself. Or if you have a friend who's experiencing this, invite to go with them. Because when you can learn together with other people, it then allows you the chance to have conversation about what you learned together. And maybe you and a friend of yours, you're supporting a third friend, maybe the 2 of you take a class together and say, all right, here's one thing we're going to do to support Mary and her husband as we go.
Are those classes virtual or are they in person, or is there a combination?
They have recorded versions of them online, or I still do Zoom calls on a monthly basis where they can jump on those. I live in Las Vegas, so Nevada and Arizona is the group that I do those for. And then they have live presentations in town. Reach out to your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Okay, so there's another thing for you. I don't have it here with me right now, but there is a 1-800 number for the Alzheimer's Association. They have licensed professionals, master's degree professionals on the phone available to you to talk 24 hours a day.
For free or for cost?
For free.
Wow. And are those trainings for free or for cost?
Yes, they're for free. All of this is for free through the association.
Maybe you can get me the number, and there's a website or something that we could put in the links for people as another resource, because that's for free, 24/7 for free. That's phenomenal.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And their website is so expansive that I even call the 1-800 number and say, hey, help me find something on the website.
And they do.
I mean, they will. And they do. Or if you're supporting a mom who's living with you and she has dementia and she wakes up at 2:00 and she's packing her bags and going to move, you call them and they're going to be there with you so you don't have to be alone.
So I can't tell you how much I love that, because the woman that I mentioned that I talked to, well, it was yesterday. They'll be a few weeks apart when they actually air, but she wrote a book, Walking with Faye, and her story was about going through all of this with her mom and dementia and moving her closer and then eventually putting her into a home. But anyway, one of her points was that the reason she wrote the book was when she went through all this, the internet wasn't what it was, and Facebook wasn't what it was, and social wasn't what it was. And you really couldn't just easily get the material around. To your point, you could call, if, mom's in a cherry tree, which was one of her examples. You could call now. You have that available to you that you could call and say, hey, help me. I don't know what the heck to do here, and get really trained professionals to help you with it for free.
For free.
I mean, I think that's important. Some people can't afford, top-notch whatever. So having that resource. So thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. Thank you again. This was fantastic. And we will put all the links and all the information for folks. And I'm going to bet that we're going to be in touch again. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
You're welcome.
You are so passionate about this, and it shows, and you're really making a difference.
Just to throw one more thing out there, each month I have a new topic that I cover on my Instagram and provide tips on helping support and how to think differently and how to speak differently. And that is Inspired Senior Care. If you go in and put all that together on Instagram, I'd love to welcome you to my community there.
Awesome. And we will put that link as well, so people can, if they're driving or whatever, they can go back to the show notes and get that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Marianne. This has been a delight.
Bye, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.